Going live. Leave a little bit for Cecil to cut off. Going live. Are the Miami Dolphins crazy if they take Justin Herbert over Tua Tagovailoa? That more this week on Thursday Night Live Audible. I did the Cecil Hot Open, Matt Waldman. Folks, you can check out the excerpt from the RSP on Justin Herbert, Oregon quarterback, for free at Football Guys. Get your RSP. So are they crazy? I mean, the reality here is Barry Jackson put out in his column that no team has done more work on Herbert than one Miami Dolphins. However, he said it's also unknown whether they're going to take him or Tagovailoa. It sounds like they're going to take a quarterback with their first pick either way. Also, will their first pick be number 3 or number 5? Eric Galco says Lions should have no trouble trading down, even include a Jordan Love in that conversation. So lots of unknowns here. But if the Dolphins were asking you, should they even be considering taking Herbert over Tagovailoa?
No, but it's but I understand why they're going to do it. Like if they go that route, because he is the athlete, and they probably feel like that with Herbert he could play right away. They feel in terms of like his health, they won't have any questions about that. They probably also feel like that with him, they have a situation where, how would I best put this? They have a player that maybe they can scheme to make him work, and I think with Herbert, you're getting more of a Carson Wentz type of player. Limit his drop back types. Let him get rid of the ball early. And if he can't get rid of the ball early, let him run and let him be able to kind of move around in the backfield and kind of then use that big arm to work over people. He makes some really impressive throws in moments, but the decisions aren't always there. He can move around the pocket and avoid people, but I think the better quarterback overall is clearly Tua.
Yeah.
And I think that they're just scared off by they're overthinking the hip.
Right. Well, and that's got to be it, right? In Herbert, and I went ahead and put that Carson Wentz picture in your excerpt, by the way, Matt. And it's great because we talked about Adrian Peterson as an inspiration for your viewing of Cam Akers. And it's interesting that Carson Wentz normally you would think would be a compliment. It would be a good thing. But I think,
and it's a neutral thing, but yeah,
it's neutral because I suppose right. You want to give some credit to Philadelphia and the situation. You want to give some credit to Wentz himself. But with Herbert, I think that the way that I've been summing him up is the sum is not equal to the parts, and you do a really good job laying out the individual parts. But just how, and I love it factor, right? Integrated technique, how it doesn't always integrate. Doesn't mean it won't integrate. But I also love the way that you lay out. And I think it's funny, Matt, because we've both been doing this for a long time. And I feel like from the philosophical standpoint of draft projection, draft scouting, there's a central question. There's a central equation, basically, of these are the things that work on Saturdays. These are the questions. These are the challenges you face on Saturdays. And then over here are the challenges you face on Sundays. How much of what made you a good player is going to translate? Is going to work? And I think I can hear or anticipate reading your breakdown of Herbert that you're already picturing like how year 1 and year 2 is going to go for him as a starter, as far as the things that are working now that the game is going to tell him, you have to evolve, and can he evolve? Where with Tagovailoa, the things that his game is based on are evolved already. I mean, the medical side, I think, is the main thing that people are wondering about him. Even with Tagovailoa, like they're worried he's going to take injuries because of the way he handles himself on the field, and that's just part of, I think, him as a warrior. I'm not sure that you can really iron that out of him, and there's a lot of good things about that. We've talked about Jordan Love. We've talked about Joe Burrow. We could go on more, but let's talk maybe a little bit more about some of the other guys, second day guys. Jalen Hurts, Jake Fromm, Jacob Eason. I guess those are the next 3, at least in terms of draft. The next 3 that are going to come off the board in the draft. Do you see anything there, or is this one of those cases? Because let me go do a rant here for a moment, Matt. People, it's just a crapshoot. The NFL doesn't know what they're doing. Well, there's a reason that if a quarterback falls out of the first round, chances are he's not going to hit. It's because generally the NFL is good enough at identifying the quarterbacks that hit that they're first round picks, if not top 3, if not top number 1, number 2 picks. They're usually some team gets hot and bothered enough about a quarterback to take him in the first if there's something there. Not always true. They should listen to Matt Waldman about Russell Wilson, for instance. However, this is why, Fromm and Eason and Hurts, they're probably not going to be first round picks, which indicates the NFL saying like, yeah. Is that basically how you would classify them? Is that being too kind to them, or is there maybe something there that the NFL is overlooking?
I think with Eason, he has the upside of being what people hope Jameis Winston could become when they were drafting Jameis Winston. Like, I think he's Jameis Winston without his feet being too slow to follow his mind, because that's what Winston is that guy where it's like his mind is very sharp, but his feet are too slow to kind of follow through, and his body therefore is late on things. And he's just not in sync in terms of mind body. I think Jacob Eason is more in sync in that regard, but he also plays on that edge of from aggressive to reckless. And he's often 2 times tips over to that edge of recklessness. But I like the toughness of his game. And I think that he has the arm, and there's a lot of flashes of that accuracy, but he's that guy that I fear a team would reach up and take in many drafts in the first round and then put him on the field and ruin him, where they flash fry him and he's burnt to a crisp. So he's that guy. Hurts I really like as a developmental prospect. I think of him as a David Garrard type of player. You give him a couple years, unlike a guy like Jordan Love, where Jordan Love repeatedly makes the same mistakes over and over again. Jalen Hurts may do that during non-pivotal moments of games where he'll get too vested in the play, but at the end of the half or at the end of the fourth quarter, he tends to sharpen up his decisions and tighten them up in a way where he's more mature. And I just love the fact that here's this guy who, while he has some accuracy issues with the back foot, that's like a rudder to a boat, and it doesn't really stay steady enough for him to get the ball in the direction pinpoint where he wants it, that's correctable. And because he's a good runner, and because he has a good deep game, and because he has moments of strong accuracy and decision making, I think that he can really improve his game over the course of time. And he's someone that when he makes a mistake, he tends to fix it within the game. Now, he may make the same mistake the next week, but it's usually not in a pivotal situation. It's more of like, I can take this risk, maybe I shouldn't, but it's not going to kill the team. So I like him enough to feel like he's not I don't think he's a second day pick. I think he's a third day pick, but I think he has that ability to grow into being a starter. So I can see how a team might say, well, if he does, we want to take him in the second day as a result of that. And I can see the argument over that. But to me, Jake Fromm does have something. And I know that a lot of people don't think that because they talk about the bad arm. And the thing that I've talked about him recently is that, his drop lengths didn't match the routes in the offense. And that's something that's been seen repeatedly. JTL Sullivan did a great job profiling that in his QB school videos. And, I think the velocity is something that he can grow with. And I like the way he plays. He can skip through some progressions a little bit. And he's not great in terms of mobility in the pocket, but he's someone that can roll out and throw dimes like in the short and intermediate range of the field, even the vertical range of the field. I think that he's going to be underrated, and I think people are going to have written him off too early. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's that like Kirk Cousins, Drew Brees kind of guy who's like kind of in between those two when it's all said and done.
And these names I've heard mentioned before with all of these players, Kirk Cousins with Fromm, and you brought up the Garrard Hurts comparison. You can win with David Garrard. That's the thing. If you embrace David Garrard, you can win with David Garrard. And the thing you have to like about Hurts, I know that a lot of people don't like to get touchy-feely about these things, but what he did, the way he handled getting usurped in Alabama, and then the way he handled a new system and how, I mean, he just seems like somebody that, let's say he has a high floor as a prospect, right? I mean, there's no trapdoors where he's just a failure or a waste of a pick. You're going to get, at the very least, a competent backup quarterback who, in a short 2 or 3 game term situation in the 4-week cycles of the NFL, can keep momentum like Teddy Bridgewater did for the Saints last year. Like, keep your season momentum going. And honestly, for teams that are, again, I think of my Steelers and what's going to come after Ben Roethlisberger.
Right.
I would love to have someone like Jalen Hurts when you match him up with a good defense, and his teammates are going to buy into him. I saw something. Tom Pelissero did a really good compilation. By the way, tremendous. Folks, get your RSP, but also, and get Jordan Reed's draft guide and get Dane Brugler's draft guide. And there's so much good stuff out there. But also, Bob McGinn is doing his series where scouts weigh in kind of unfiltered. Tom Pelissero is compiling stuff right now. There's a lot of really great draft stuff coming out. It reminds me of the days when we used to wait for Rick Gosselin's mock the morning of the draft.
Yeah.
Folks, this is where we're going to sound like really old guys, because if you don't know, this is one of those, like, were you sick in the brain about the draft before there was an industry or before it was kind of cool? It's not actually cool. Cool among football people. And anyway, by the way, K1 says R.I.P. Lee.
Oh man,
another one.
What? Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, Lee Conitz, the coronavirus. Another one, 92. Wow. And too many greats gone. Too many greats. First birth of the cool session. See, I'm getting off on tangents now, but it's just go listen to Birth of the Cool, folks. Miles Davis, Gil Evans. It really should be a Gil Evans album, right? Gil Evans, Miles Davis, and so many other incredible musicians. Birth of the Cool changed music.
Lee Konitz has taught a lot of people.
Yeah,
he's what a fantastic educator too.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Anyway,
yes, I know, right? See, this is 2020, man.
Yeah.
So anyway, the Rick Gosselin mock. For those of you that are newer into the draft game, Rick Gosselin was a writer for the Dallas Morning News, and he was truly hooked in. I think that it was truly trust. It's the trust you build up over years in the league, where everybody, and I mean everybody, even in the league, would be on the edge of their seat for his mock that would come out the morning of the draft, and it would always have a pick or two that nobody was on, zero radars, and was nailed. The last one I remember was Dante Whitner to the Bills. And in fact, if you saw something in Rick Gosselin's mock that looked wrong, immediately your brain said, "Well, that's going to happen." If I'm rejecting that, if I'm saying that can't happen, that's going to happen.
He had pictures of GMs in compromising positions.
I mean, the information that he got, he was a super nice guy. That's why I want to say it's just trust that he built up. I remember talking to him at the draft one year in New York, and he's just a real nice. You just look at the picture of him. Sometimes you can't judge a book by the cover, right? I mean, he's just a real nice, friendly, approachable, knowledgeable, professional person. And there were so many people like that in the draft. I mean, in this moment, actually, I can say, let's pause and have a moment of silence for the draft not being in person this year, because you've been there, I've been there. I mean, there's an energy crackling in the air that only happens in that place. So anyway, Tom Pelissero in the quarterbacks compilation, again, he's talking to executives. Bob McGinn is talking to scouts, and he polled, I think maybe there's some executives in the McGinn piece too. Again, Athletic is free, I think, for at least another 2 months if you haven't checked it out. They polled, by the way, Matt, Pelissero did 12 high-level executives or GMs, Herbert, Tango Vailoa, and it was 7-5 Herbert. But I think it was like predicting who's going to go second, not who would you pick second, based on the wording he used, although it was not totally clear. But he said one of the interesting things he said about Hurts was that, he wasn't a total take charge kind of leader, But I don't really think that that's something that you should. I mean, one of the interesting things about reading the McGinn and the Pelissero pieces is you actually find out how scouts and executives think. And some of the stuff is like really insightful and interesting. And some of it shows you that those old modes of thinking, man, right?
Yeah, I've got a rant for that one.
Sure.
Oh, listen, okay. This is the same thing as Arian Foster is soft This is the same thing as some of these other things, like Teddy Bridgewater didn't have leadership qualities, even though he would perform best on the leadership exam. And the reason it is that way, and I'm not saying it's a race related thing as more as I'm saying it's in this case, is that they saw the fact that he took his benching okay in the most pivotal game of his career and didn't go into a shell and was rah-rah and supportive the entire next year. And they're going to take that as a bad thing? That's freaking ridiculous. Like, how do you, because he came back and played at Oklahoma and he played lights out football at Oklahoma a year later. Look at Kareem Hunt, okay? Kareem Hunt, for whatever you feel about him off the field, Kareem Hunt missed out on a Super Bowl championship because of his stupidity. Comes to Cleveland, says all the right things, does all the right things, blocking for Nick Chubb, looking good doing all of that, saying he's the biggest Nick Chubb cheerleader on the team. After the season, after the Super Bowl, he's busted for driving under the influence, and he's like intoxicated, telling the cop that, his life's a mess and, he regrets what happened, and the Super Bowl really has got him down and in a bad way. And he wished, all of this stuff never happened. So if you're going to say that you want a guy to take it hard because that's going to show leadership, go look at Kareem Hunt. Sure. And then go talk to me about a guy who actually had enough confidence in himself to go, I got benched by a player who won the national championship and I didn't get to do that. And I showed enough confidence to stay the course and then find my opportunity and leave and play lights out football. And you don't want that on your team, you're an idiot.
So the wording, Max, I wanted to make sure to tell you exactly what it said.
All right.
It said, Hurt's quiet, no-nonsense personality gave some teams pause early in the process. The staff at Oklahoma assured him it comes across the right way in the locker room, and Hurts can let his guard down at times. So, it's that armchair psychology that you talk about. It's this analysis.
The whole editorializing of stuff that, it doesn't need to be there. And meanwhile, Herbert's going to be that guy who, like, David Carr's his way into the league,
sure. Well, no, and absolutely. And the thing is, now there's some parts of this that is bunk, and there's some parts of it that, at the very least, if we do tell the story in reverse and we say what were some signs with Herbert, I know one of the things is that he's definitely not a rah-rah guy.
No.
Like, he's definitely not somebody that is going to fill that role, not yet. And then is that the kind of thing that you can transplant or cultivate in a quarterback?
But he's a good student.
Which right. Exactly.
We're going to bring that up as more of a positive, even if Jalen Hurts is a good student too. But we're going to, some of that is just crazy. And it's like Josh Herbert can be a good NFL quarterback. Jalen Hurts, I think, can develop into being a good NFL quarterback. If they both, I could see where Hurts could wind up a better quarterback than Herbert if Herbert doesn't grow beyond what he is and he's not protected by a scheme for longer than a year. But I think it's going to take Hurts longer and may have a harder road ahead for him to even get there. So that's kind of the difference between the two if you're going to really boil it down.
Our friend Jason Cornell says, stick with a man bun, it's kind of there. And that was a do-rag.
Oh, this is a hat, baby. Oh, this is a hat, my man.
Well, either way, it's the way we wear it, It's the way we wear it, the old guys that we are. Right. Kenny Pop says Becton likes to cook. There was one about, Mekhi Becton that he liked to eat and cook too much. But the thing is, so what's insightful for us on the meta level is when you read these pieces, wonderful things, and let us say in this age where, a lot of us have careers not as journalists, and there aren't that many actual journalists left. Part of journalism is cultivating connections, cultivating relationships, so that you get this kind of access. So again, hats off with the Bob McGinn piece, and you see how scouts think. And some, one of the takes on Jalen Hurts here says, I agree with Mike Gundy. He's a wishbone quarterback. 1 read, 2 read, and run. And then I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying you'll see some of the things. So, rounding out this class, and I think that, what's good, what you should take away from what Matt just said is that whether it's Eason or Fromm or Hertz, if your team, and I'm assuming these are all second day quarterbacks, maybe one of them will even fall to the third day, that, there's reason to think that your team did well being patient and getting one of those quarterbacks, especially if it's Herbert or Love that they take in the first, that they pass on in the first round to get one of them. So rounding it out, Matt, I mean, some people like James Morgan, a fighter. Some people like Anthony Gordon. You got to look at Anthony Gordon a little differently after what Gardner Minshew did, right? Although here's a really funny thing on Anthony Gordon. They said his body looks like he's never touched a weight. See, that's great.
Yep. And exactly. And Joe Montana had no calves whatsoever.
Right.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and then there's also Jake Luton. And I want to bring up Jake Luton just for this reason. Is Greg Cosell, who we once did a show with. And Greg Cosell is, a luminary. Truly a luminary.
Sure, he's great.
Greg Cosell was doing this kind of analysis, like Matt Waldman RSP style analysis, when there was just, I don't even know if there was anybody else out there doing it, not for public consumption, the way he was doing it. So he's been putting out his scouting reports. His scouting reports are tremendous. And he said about Luton, if I'm saying that right, that he liked him, and something to the effect of could, in the right system, with the right coaching, could be as good as Jared Goff running the Rams offense. And I think Greg Cosell is like totally on the up and up. So I don't think he was throwing shade at the Rams for signing Goff to that contract,
Right.
But then I threw shade at the Rams for that contract, and he retweeted it. So, he sees him as a classic system quarterback, if you will. Anybody from that third day undrafted free agent, or anybody, a name that you want to bring up that nobody's bringing up.
I'm going to say this because and if Greg Cosell gets back to this, Greg, understand that I've really enjoyed having the 3-hour conversation we had years ago, just on the phone talking about players and doing the long form interview I did. And I'm just playing with you because I have a feeling that you have someone tweeting for you, because you retweet everything anybody says about you. And you might want to be selective about some of the things that
retweets are not endorsements, right? That's
right.
Anyway,
tweets are endorsements. So, and I'd just say, keep that in mind. But Luton certainly. I mean, and I thought it was funny what you said. I wasn't trying to throw shade on your tweet, but I'm at the same time, it was like I've seen stuff where I'm like, that reminds me of that. But I like the guy who's never touched a weight. I think, I like Anthony Gordon, and I'll explain why. I mean, Will Hewlett's is a guy that I've had on my shows a number of times, and he's the head of one of the main trainers of the quarterback collective. And that's where Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan are a big part of the curriculum there. And Hewlett's a very renowned quarterback coach. And he said that from a standpoint of what it takes in here to be a quarterback, in terms of his release quickness, in terms of how he sees the field, and he anticipates certain areas of the field, they believe he could develop into a starter in time. Now, his footwork was a mess, and he's one of those guys that needs to get he kind of hops into position, and that way he loses rhythm. He doesn't really have defined footwork the way he needed to. They've worked on that a good bit with him. So I think that that's going to be helpful. And yeah, he probably needs to get sturdier, for sure. And there's some pocket issues with him where I feel like he could be a little bit better with his clock, and in terms of recognizing certain blitz looks so that he can get, identify them, get out of the way. But he makes some throws, man, that are really worthwhile to watch. And I could see how some team might take him late, and he climbs up the depth chart to maybe in a couple of years he's at a point where he's a legitimate backup, and then he might be able to surprise from there.
I just still like that idea about playing in a Mike Leach system, other than having Mike Leach rub off on you. I mean, having Mike Leach, he has a class.
Could you imagine Mike Leach in a combine interview if he were a player?
Oh, I mean,
he'd be like one of us.
I got won over by Mike Leach when he was at Texas Tech. I mean, I shouldn't say like won over, but something that really excited
endeared him.
Yeah. What's that?
He endeared
Yeah,
himself to you?
when he said about, because they have played Texas A&M, and like the core at Texas A&M, and Texas A&M is a fantastic school, and people that go there are often very, very proud of their affiliation with it, and they should. But I just thought it was really funny because he said, well, they dress up, the students dress up and play soldier at A&M, so we're going to dress up and play pirate. Like everyone's going to come to the game as like a pirate, because it's the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Anyway. And because he does teach a class called Insurgent Warfare in Football. I mean, this is not an invention of our brains. Wouldn't it be funny if he actually uses Insurgent Warfare to talk about football strategy? And I think that any quarterback that's trying to make it the NFL, period, probably should think about Insurgent Warfare, but especially if you're trying to make it as a non-first round pick. But I also just love the reps. It's like brain mapping. I mean, the fact that you get so many, and what was Gordon's completion percentage, like 71.6 or something? So, I mean, especially when you think about the volume, I don't even care what kind of throw you're making, just muscle memory and brain mapping to how to diagnose things.
That system's very much a spread out the field. So you're seeing the field from width. You have to read the field sideline to sideline very well in that offense because it spreads the field horizontally so well. And that's a very nice trait to be able to have. I mean, Tom Brady does that very well, and it's something that you want to be able to do, especially in these style of offenses. And it's just a distilled version of the West Coast offense. So really, it's something to build on and you can get better at. And for him, it is just a matter of he needs a couple of years to get his feet together and maybe, add some calves and some abs and some glutes and some, quads or whatever it is that he's missing, which is pretty much everything, other than a quick release in terms of his frame. But, we've seen guys like that do well. So like I said, Joe Montana had no calves whatsoever. And they make fun of that. And he looked like an accountant, and he might've been the greatest quarterback who ever lived.
Right. Quarterback is still a position that non-athletes, at least in NFL terms, can make it because of the nature of the position. So, we'll see. We'll see about Gordon. We'll see about this year's quarterback class. But it's certainly going to give us a lot of intrigue. When we come back here next Thursday night, lots of special guests too. This is a wonderful tradition that we get to have. Thank you, technology, for this. That number 3 pick, is Detroit going to trade down? Eric Galco saying they're not going to have any trouble trading down. It could be Love. It could be Herbert. It could be Tagovailoa.
I'm going to get a sandwich ready.
Yeah,
for this. I'm going to get a sandwich ready. I'm going to leave it outside for a little while.
That's a big moment. Number 3 is a big moment. Number 5 with Miami. Number 6 with the Chargers. Although Peter King said that Anthony Lynn likes Tyrod Taylor, maybe even for more than 1 year. And again, you can win with Tyrod Taylor. Anthony Lynn has won with Tyrod Taylor. At least one of these quarterbacks is going to fall, I think. Maybe Love. I mean, Love would be the most likely one. And Ian Rappaport has said between 5 and 25 for Love. So 5, obviously, we know who picks there, Miami. 25 is Minnesota, the second pick that Minnesota has, actually, because they got Buffalo's first. So maybe Ian heard little birdie say that Minnesota's open to trading down, and maybe that's the team that trades back into the first to get a quarterback. Maybe Indianapolis. So all these things we'll be tracking. First night of the draft coming up. Wonderful. Feels so good. Reunited, and it feels so good with all of our football people out there. Thank you tonight, everybody, by the way, showing up. It's great.
For sure.
Let's turn the page to the tight ends. Okay. You look at this tight end class. Oh, man. I mean, this is worse than the Henry Hooper class, And I know that you like Hooper, and you definitely get a gold star for that because he got $10 million a year, and he's definitely. I think Austin Hooper has been as good of a pro as he was going to be.
Yeah,
and he did his job competently for Atlanta, and Cleveland and Stefanski. It just makes sense for him to bring him in, pair him up with Njoku. I don't see even a Hunter Henry or an Austin Hooper in this class. Although if there is those guys, and what I mean by that is somebody who outperforms because they're competent, and I think from a fantasy perspective, you have to also look at the ingredient of the role that Hooper plays. So it'll be interesting to see Hurst this year and see what his numbers look like. Obviously, his competence plays part in that, but Hurst, I think, offers more added value, at least after the catch, than Hooper did. And you have in this class, Harrison Bryant. I think Harrison Bryant was, I don't want to give away spoilers.
Yeah, he was.
He was your number one. And I watched Harrison Bryant, and I saw a highly skilled player. I just pictured him in NFL surroundings, and I think Kyle Juszczyk was brought up as a comparison for him. Okay, I can get with that, Harrison Bryant is that kind of player and very valuable to his team and probably worth a second-round pick. In fact, Peter Schrager put him to the Patriots number 23 in his mock. I could see Bill Belichick looking at someone like Harrison Bryant, looking at the need and saying, like, that's my kind of guy, very skilled, but for fantasy just doesn't lift up my skirt, And the same thing with Cole Kmet, right? And the funny thing is Cole Kmet, I'm just thinking like Marilyn Monroe on the so the classic picture.
Does everyone want to see Bloom in a white dress now under a sewer grate doing the look? Maybe that should be the new football guys logo for Bloom.
Don't wear white after Labor Day, but it's not Labor Day. No, look,
don't shave your legs.
I definitely won't. Cole Kmet is the other one, and actually, Peter King brought up Cole Kmet as a potential pick by Belichick, right? And it makes sense to me too because he's the other very skilled but kind of unexciting athlete in this. Someone said like a stiffer Gronk, And I can see both Kmet and Bryant translating and being good NFL players, but not really adding anything to their targets. Kmet maybe gives you that above the rim game a little more, and his speed can surprise you. But I didn't see anything athletically that could take it to another level. And I think that's the best this class has to offer. And then on the other hand, there's maybe like Adam Troutman, who looks, beautiful as far as a specimen running and going up for the ball, but it's at Dayton, and you just have no idea how much is going to translate there. There's Okwuegbunam from
Okwuegbunam.
Yeah, and yes. He can run fast in a straight line, and he's big, but we'll see. And I know you'd said that you like that, but my point is, this is going to be an overdrafted class of tight ends to begin with because there's just no anchor. There's nobody leading this class, and teams are going to take it in the second and third round anyway because they want those two tight end sets. They gave Jesse James $6 million a year. They gave Tyler Kroft $6 million a year. Teams want tight ends. But I just was so underwhelmed when I watched this class. How, Matt, did you see this class in terms of the classes you've been watching in years past?
It can be tight end's a tough position, and I think it's a tough position to evaluate all the time because there is that element as a blocker, and it depends on how much teams want to value that. And then also certain aspects of receiving that we either overvalue or undervalue and how they fit into an offense. So I'm with you. Harrison Bryant to me he has the most upside of guys that if you're just looking at more from a receiver standpoint, heavily towards the receiver, competent enough as a blocker. He's very good at being able to find open space. So that's kind of his redeeming quality. Cole Kmet to me is he's going to be higher on NFL draft boards than he would be in the rookie scouting portfolio. Because the rookie scouting portfolio, again, I try and lean this particular position more towards the receiving aspect of the game. And while he's the best all-around looking prospect in terms of like size, everything you described, like he looks like the guy that should step off the bus and be called a tight end. But when you get him on the field, he doesn't catch contested plays. He drops a lot of contested catches. He drops his head an awful lot as a blocker, which means he misses his blocks against smaller players. He gets pushed around by bigger players because he drops his weight. His feet are way too wide, so he's not in a balanced position. He has a lot of work to do as a blocker, and that's supposed to be his strength. And then as a receiver, while he does, like I agree, he has that kind of sneaky speed, and he can go up and win balls when they're passes that he's not dealing with contested plays. So to me, the upside of him is a guy that's never going to ever be in the conversation of Travis Kelce, Rob Gronkowski, top guy. I don't even think he'd be in the conversation with a Hunter Henry or a Dallas Goedert or an Austin Hooper, because all those guys can also make contested plays. I think he's more in line with basically an Anthony Fasano, and trying to grow into be Anthony Fasano. So he's way down on my list. Chase Claypool, to me, is kind of like is he a tight end? Is he a wide receiver? Does it really matter? Because
yes, I think it does matter. So, but in the McGinn piece, he said that their teams are split. That they don't know whether they see him as a tight end or a wide receiver. But I see this more definitively, Matt. And then you can do whatever you want with this. I just think that watching Chase Claypool, when you see how he plays against longer, more athletic, more fine-tuned to frustrate their opponent outside cornerbacks, because we're talking about using him on the outside, he's going to meet his match. He's a monotone. It reminds me of Arcega-Whiteside last year, in that he's a monotone runner in his routes. He, I think, can be influenced. I think he's going to be passive as a route runner. I think that's going to, first of all, be a problem. And then I think that while he can win at the catch point, another thing that I'm putting more and more weight on, Matt, when I look at watch these wide receivers, is how comfortable are you putting your hands on your opponent when the ball's in the air, or putting your hands on your opponent at the stem of a route? Just does it come naturally to you to use the proximity of your opponent to create advantage for yourself? Because if you don't do that naturally in college, then that's not going to come and you're going to have someone that comes naturally to you in the pros against you. So now put Chase Claypool in the Evan Ingram role, where he's against a safety, where he's against a linebacker who doesn't have the ball skills, who doesn't have all of the focus on thwarting and rerouting your opponent. Now Chase Claypool looks like a massive mismatch to me.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I meant by, like, does it really matter? Because if you say he's a big slot receiver or a move tight end, that's the way I looked at it. Because I agree with you with the outside. He's not an outside receiver. He will be if you can match him up against a linebacker or a safety by the motion that's out there, kind of the way they do other tight ends. But yeah, technically he's an inside receiver, and that's his best game. Trotman's fun to watch, and I think that a lot of his game may eventually project. But you're right. It's a matter of how good is he going to be against players who can foil him and be patient with him. But he does have some really nice releases off the line. And he has that, it's a pretty incredible quickness to have a 6.78 3-cone drill and a 4.27 for a tight end who's 6'5", 255. So I like him. The guy you didn't mention that I'm a big fan of is Devin Asiasi.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that guy basically got put in a situation where Caleb Wilson, the PFF favorite, best tight end in the class because of his catching ability and the yardage production that he had, and he fit their metrics pretty well. He hasn't had much of a career yet in the NFL, and he wasn't, I think he was a late round pick.
Yeah.
But he played with Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen was comfortable with them. They played for several years. And sometimes what happens is the better NFL caliber player sits longer if they already have a guy who's already plugged into the system and playing well. And I think that's what happened with Asiasi. When you watch him play, very fluid, very skilled right after the catch. He really snaps his routes well. I think the blocking ability is only going to get better, and I don't think it's bad right now. I just think that, it's something that he could become even more adept with various types of blocks. He's very good out in space right now as it is, but even at the line of scrimmage, I think he can be good. So I'm a big fan of his. Okwuegbunam is interesting to me because a lot of people are down on the kind of the bend that he has in his routes and kind of slow in and out of breaks. But I think there's something to him that I think we might. Did you bring
up Ladarius Green when you were talking about him?
I was actually kind of saying that more to Chase Claypool.
Oh, well.
But but I do. But I can see that. I can see how that might be the case with Okwuegbunam. But it's interesting. I kind of see him more as what people hoped Austin Seferian-Jenkins could become. So I kind of see him a little bit more in that realm. Bryson Hopkins is kind of an H-back who's very quick, but like, is he really going to be able to hold up? And the most fun guys in this class to me are kind of a tale of two opposites. One is Cheyenne O'Grady out of Arkansas. Okay. Cheyenne O'Grady's he's like a hard runner, very tough, goes up and wins the ball like daylights. You talk about putting your hands on people and going up and win the ball and dealing with contact. He's it. He's kind of like Jared Everett if Jared Everett was a reform school kid. And because Cheyenne O'Grady basically got suspended twice by the team, and they mutually agreed to part company at the end of before the end of the season this year. And Dre Greenlaw, his high school classmate and Arkansas teammate, called O'Grady out for missing class and missing practice. He called him out to the media and did that. And now Greenlaw is a stand-up guy. He's the same kind of guy who like saw like some frat boys try to take advantage of a drunk woman at a party, and like he literally risked his school career because he was somewhere that he shouldn't have been after hours to like make sure that was stopped and call the police and make things known. And he risked basically his scholarship to make sure that this woman was okay. And so he's kind of a stand-up guy that way. So you can see as a leader that he'd call out his classmate and go, dude, you've got more talent than that. But if he gets it together, and Thaddeus Moss, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
He's not exciting because he's not fast. He has no speed whatsoever, but he has great hands and he's a fantastic blocker. And like, I think of him as that if he shows just a little bit more burst and he finds the right team, he could be the way the Pittsburgh Steelers used Heath Miller back in the day. Doesn't mean that he's Heath Miller, because Heath Miller was one of the most underrated guys and a much better athlete than people give him credit for. But Thaddeus Moss is a great blocker, good route runner, very good receiver, just doesn't have the downfield speed. And so he's kind of a mix to me of kind of like Dennis Pitta, Heath Miller. In the right system, he could really surprise. But again, like you said, overall, we could talk about Pinckney or Deguara. There's a lot of guys here. It's like they could have 1 or 2 years where you're like, oh, good fantasy production, but from a football standpoint, they're probably more valued as what they can be as role players as opposed to really starters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just the ceiling is low. On Greenlaw, too. Remember, he got in last year, I think, when Quan Alexander got hurt and did really well for himself. 49ers, right. The 49ers, like in 3 years, have gone from hell to heaven with linebackers. Because remember, they drafted Reuben Foster, got back in the first to get him. They signed Malcolm Smith. That didn't work out or yield anything, but now they're set with Fred Warner. Everybody wanted their team to draft Fred Warner.
And think about the linebackers they've had for so long and different coaching regimes that they've had. That tells you that there's some scouts probably in that organization that know how to pick linebackers, because even the guys that they signed that didn't work out, it was because what they did off the field, not necessarily on it.
Yes, absolutely. The Steelers wide receivers. You mentioned Asiasi, and I got around to watching him. And what's fun about him, and Hopkins is interesting in so much as, he seems to be like somewhat refined and skilled, and he's a big wide receiver, but he can do his job pretty well. Asiasi is interesting in that late bloomer theory, right?
Yes.
That we still haven't even seen close to what this dude can be. But you see the outlines of it, because I think he weighed in at like 256, 258, but he plays big, He just looked like he was a pain to try to handle at the catch point and after the catch, in a way, like just a rugged dude that is comfortable out there. Like some of the same quality we talked about with Juwan Jennings, just a guy in the middle of the field that likes mixing it up there.
And they both transition very fast. First step downhill.
Yeah. Yeah. So I liked what I saw from a CSE, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's the best fantasy tight end in this class. And I can imagine a few teams, Matt, that would make us go, ooh, on where he lands.
Do you remember Fred Smith, the Washington Redskin? Is that what his name was? Who got hurt, but he was a hard running kind of guy. Yeah. He and Algie Crumpler are kind of the two guys that compare very well, who kind of rumble downhill with good quickness and are big enough to do some damage. And both those guys, were good players when they were healthy.
Yeah, Crumpler was a really nice player. I want to say the Crumpler comparison, maybe it was Lance Zierlein who tossed that out with Hunter Bryant, I believe. I could be.
No, I think it was Asiasi. I think
was it Asiasi? I'm sorry, Asiasi.
Yeah,
and you mentioned Thaddeus Moss, Randy Moss's son, and he's gonna, I think, be a good football player. I just think for the things that we specifically care about in fantasy,
not at all.
It's not necessarily there to light the fuse, but it's going to be fun to watch him for sure. So, not the greatest tight end class, but always worth looking at. It's always worth getting to know these names. And earlier today, and I don't mean to speak for you, Jason Haggerty, we talked about this, I think, 2 weeks ago. Jason Haggerty asked your favorite wide receiver in the draft, and it is
Quintez Cephas.
Well, yeah, but your number one receiver.
My number one receiver.
Oh, he said favorite. You know what? Yeah. Don't do that. I said CD Lamb again. Spoiler.
That's okay. I think
Quintez Cephas is great. Yeah, absolutely. It's fun to watch these players, and aside from ranking them and projecting them, thinking about floor and ceiling, just who you like and who you see in terms of playing style.
Who's your favorite player in this draft, regardless of position? Do you have a favorite or a few favorites that just come to mind? It doesn't have to be the favorite.
Right.
I'll give you mine if you want.
And please go ahead and I'll think about it. Yeah.
Grant Delpit is my favorite player in this class. I know a lot of people are down on him from this year, but I think he's Charles Woodson. What
do you do? So with a player like Delpit, I mean, was there a big difference 2018 to 2019 with him? Because it seemed like he was a lot more highly regarded at this time last year.
I think that he probably had some situations where he made some mistakes this past year that people kind of counted him down a little bit more. And I tend to think that people get too excited, heading into the year about certain players and don't see them well in that well-rounded sense. But yeah, he takes some chances he shouldn't. He can take some angles that maybe are tough. But he's also a guy that's very instinctive and he's an unbelievably fluid athlete who can do so many things. And I think that, I saw enough in his game this year that I didn't think it was that much of a difference. So I'm, I study
it's a great safety class, by the way. He may fall to the second round.
Yeah, he may. And if he does, whoever gets him, I'd still have a grade on him that I would look at and say, I'd love him to be a top 15 player. What he can do as a pass rusher, what he can do with some coverage, what he can do anticipating. I mean, his pass rushing skills are great. What he does against the run is very strong.
Yeah.
He's not Eric Berry. Eric Berry is much more physical player, but Charles Woodson, man. Charles Woodson was a safety. That's kind of what Delpit has in his game, and he's very creative. There's not many players I'd want more than him.
No, I think that what's fun about the safety class is, depending on who you ask, some people love Antoine Winfield, and I get that.
Right.
Some people love Ashton Davis, and I get that. What Ashton Davis can be, especially because he's another one. He was a walk-on, there should be some all-time walk-on team players that walked onto their college team while everybody is Michael Jordan. What was the story? They got cut from the 8th grade team or something like that.
Sure.
So under that heading, I mean, I'll tell you players that stuck with me, and it's not going to be exciting. I mean, it's kind of low-hanging fruit, but this is the reason why teams are excited to get these players. It's not going to be obscure. I mean, Jeffrey Okudah, I think what's interesting about Okudah is now you have this late coming up on the outside down the stretch narrative that some teams have CJ Henderson ahead of Okudah, which could be why Detroit is more willing to trade down. Because if Detroit's one of those teams, why use the number 3 pick on Okudah when you can trade down and get Okudah or Henderson? And perhaps Okudah may not even be the first off the board. Our own Cecil Lammey said that the Panthers could take Henderson. So, if someone trades up for a quarterback with Detroit that's not in the top 7, and we'll see. Maybe it's a race to get CJ Henderson and his gaudy physical traits. But the thing about Okudah that I like is you watch him and he's so confident. I mean, he just has the confidence and the ability to back it up of NFL shutdown corner. I think, was it T. Higgins? And, Higgins, I think, got him once, but the rest of the time he kind of was a step ahead of Higgins in a way that you could tell Higgins didn't really have something to counteract that. And Okudah knew it too. You could just see the way that he was handling himself, the way that he was able to click and close and jump routes and anticipate targets. And, he really neutralized T. Higgins. And that's a good simulation of the kind of physical talents he would have to face on the outside on Sundays. So I like that. And then on the other side, that Clemson side, Isaiah Simmons is just fun, man. I mean, well, you just see, because there's just times that you watch, you're kind of lulled. I know that I've watched truly a fraction of the time watching these cut-ups of plays as you have, but there is something very beneficial that comes from how you get lulled, almost hypnotized, and then things pop out and jump out at you because your brain is kind of predicting the range of things that are going to happen on a play with a player, and when something happens outside of that range, good or bad, you take note, like you set up. And with Simmons, you're watching him, and you almost think like, did I just have a fugue? Like, did I just lose time? Because how could I watch somebody who did this like 3 plays ago do this in a way that's really, he looks so comfortable detached from the formation in the slot, but he can really bend and dip and turn the corner like an edge rusher. And, just it's so exciting to think about the impact. I think, who was it? Julian Peterson, I remember, was a player that
Michigan State.
He can just affect the play anywhere. Brian Urlacher is a name that was brought up.
Sure.
And I think those are names that we should be thinking about. I'm excited to see who takes him.
I've got a couple others that are just kind of favorites that maybe aren't like high round guys, but they're guys that they were notable for me all year. Justin Madubuike, the Texas A&M defensive tackle, he can play the nose, he can play the 3 technique, he can play the 5 technique. He's constantly has to be double teamed. He's smart. If you're going to try misdirection plays on him or long developing plays on him, good luck. He's going to sniff that out. He's going to be there. He knows how to get low. He knows how to use his hands well. He has some bend to be able to pass rush a little bit. He's a little shorter than what you'd want to see maybe, but super smart guy. I really love his game. Then a guy, Evan Weaver, the linebacker for Cal. A lot of people are starting to be down on him a little bit more than what I've seen, in terms of lately. But I think he's a very good coverage player, and I believe that Cal's player said that Cal's coaches, there's some experienced coaches at Cal who said that he's like the best cover linebacker that they've ever been around. And I thought he was extremely smart, seemed to be quick to the ball, really liked the way that he played football. That was someone that really impressed me overall, and I think that's going to end up being a surprisingly good player. And Kindle Vildor, the cornerback out of Georgia Southern, and he also has Monquavius Brinson, who's on the opposite side of him, and they were both playing press coverage pretty much for the past 2 years as their little version of Hanford Dixon and Minifield over, for Georgia, the Georgia Southern Cleveland Browns department there, kind of thing. But they shut down. They did a good job shutting down Clemson and their top receivers and playing them very tight. And Brinson's a little bigger, a little bit more physical. Vildor was seen more as one of the top seniors in the class, someone who's a good ball hawk. They both come up and defend the run well. Vildor's very good in the run. Very aggressive, and I think that Vildor is going to be an interesting player. And Monquavius Brinson, I think, is a player that could wind up maybe making a team as an undrafted free agent and working his way into a role. And the last guy I'm just going to mention, who is an absolute long shot, like someone who we will not hear about, but maybe he works his way through Canada and then gets into the NFL. Fitzgerald Mofor, a linebacker out of UAB. He played at some military school in Virginia, and he's got the size. He's in the 250 range. He was a middle linebacker, and he led UAB in tackles and led the Sun Belt in tackles for a couple years. Then they moved him to the weak side. But his story is great because he literally found out that UAB, when they closed their program and they reopened it back up, that they were looking for players. And without talking to anybody, he left Virginia, the state of Virginia, left his school after playing a little lower college football, and drove down to UAB and lived out of his car and then lived in a hotel for months until he could earn himself a scholarship with the team. That's how bad he wanted it. And he's instinctive. He's physical. He's not extremely quick, but he certainly understands. And see, when the cats start coming up into the screen and start wanting to like be a part of it.
Right,
this
right.
is the note that because all my cats like defensive players, and they'd come
Right.
up when I started. See, your cats do the same thing. He likes Fitzgerald Mulford too. I can tell he likes those underrated guys, and he's gonna. Mulford will come downfield, and he's great in short yardage. So I think we got a shot there with Fitzgerald Mulford, just because your cat has given the seal of approval.
Exactly. This is the cat. This is Judy. She's a Maine Coon mainly.
See?
And she is the cat of our two cats. We have Opal, the Siamese, who's really more like a member of the family, and Judy, the Maine Coon, and she's the one that's just an urban legend because nobody sees her except members of the family. Otherwise, she makes herself very scarce. She believed in social distancing long before it was necessary. And Maine Coons are incredible. They're so affectionate. This is all due to the love of my life, Kate. That she wanted to see we should get a Maine Coon. They're so lovable. They really just exist to soak up love. You know, like if there was a stuffed animal that could be like a Maine Coon, it would be the best-selling thing. It'd be like Tickle Me Elmo one Christmas.
You could tie them in knots. My daughter had a Maine Coon, and literally he would lay in the morning. He would lay on the floor, and I'd put my foot on him and like rub his belly, and he'd grab on it, and we'd pretend that my leg was a broomstick and he was like the dust mop. And he would that's what he wanted to do every day.
Yeah, it's incredible. You know, I just joke. She loves it. She loves rubbing against everything when she's in the mood to soak up love. And then when she's not, you just don't really see her. You know, she just comes out like a little woodland creature that just comes out when it's time for affection.
Well, Miss Fitzgerald Mulford over there looks like she's,
yes,
I think
we'll remember this moment.
Approval.
We'll remember this moment. And I'll bring a couple more names. We've got just a couple more minutes, and I'll say this like let non-marquee names from marquee programs. Damon Arnett, the corner from Ohio State. It's like the year that Gary and Conley came out with Marshawn Lattimore. The other corner, you just like the competitiveness. I want to say again, and we benefit from all of the tremendous voices and talents that have come into this draft space in the last 5 years, even or 10 years. Remember Draft Mecca, the Draft Mecca crew class. There's been a couple of waves of influx, and everything has gotten so much smarter and better for all the good people. And I love how much I hear the term competitive toughness now in draft profile scouting reports. You see that with Damon Arnett. And then another name that's come up, and I know our man Jordan Reed, again, check out his draft guide. If you want to get a draft guide, like a full offense defense draft guide, Jordan Reed, absolutely. Sadiq Charles, the tackle from LSU. And this guy, I think that in Dane Brugler, he was like the 162nd pick. Draft Network has him as the 75th overall ranked player. You can get a guy like Sadiq Charles. Hey, I mean, this is a good offensive tackle class at the top, but it's a good offensive tackle class throughout if you can get someone like Sadiq Charles on the second or third day. LSU, we're going to be talking about a lot of LSU players in this draft. Gil Brandt said he might break the record this year. Gil Brandt. And isn't that great that, we have like on one end, like Benjamin Solak and the Draft Network crew, because Benjamin, I mean, I love Benjamin Solak's work.
He looks like Dustin Hoffman and Mrs. Robinson in The Graduate. And I can say that affectionately because we pick on each other all the time, he and I always talk about how short he is and how young he is because I'm the old man around there. So, but yeah, he's a brilliant mind.
And then he really is. You have Gil Brandt, who I don't know if he's in his late 80s at this point, but still just as vibrant and just as tuned in and excited. I got to meet him at the draft too in 2006.
Did you guys take him out to eat?
Yeah, right. Should have. Okay. Yeah. And I think that he just ran down the list of the most prolific single classes for a team. I think maybe it was like 1984 Texas or something like that. But he said he thinks LSU has a chance to break it this year. And it was a special LSU team. And the first pick will be an LSU player. And then we'll be off. So we'll be back here next Thursday night getting guests lined up. And of course, Jacob Moses is like, hey, like you guys did at the end of this year when you let everyone come on the show. You should do that during the draft. So who knows? We may even do that. We may even let some of y'all come and join us. Maybe we'll do something like question and answer. Go ahead.
We've known you for a long time.
Yeah.
So, if you can channel like your earlier years and like get really upset like the Jaguars fan that I watched at the draft and I went to meet Bloom and everybody for the first time. who like took off his jersey, slammed it on the floor, and walked out of Madison Square Garden,
Right.
after they picked one player, and you could do that on the show. It might be kind of fun.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely have fun, and we'll be here. We'll come on sometime before the first round starts, ramp up for a few minutes, and then see what happens and enjoy the night together, because it's what we're all about here at Football Guys. We just like hanging out, watching football together, picking each other's brains, being stimulated, always stimulating here. And maybe I'm going to ask and beg, and if Cecil has to be on for the whole time with Denver, then he does, but we need some Cecil, so we'll see if we can get him, and who else we can get here. A week until the draft. A week until the NFL draft. It's the sports life preserver. So let's all cling to it together. Everybody, make sure to wash your hands. Wear that mask.